Okay, so we've got Joe and Silvia here to talk about the first few weeks of feeding their babies and their memories of it and their experiences of it. Hi guys, you all right?
Hello. Yeah.
Hello.
Good, good. So you're both in quite... Joe, do you want to tell us how old your children are?
Yeah, so I've got two girls. My first is 6 now and my younger one is 3. So yeah, I'm thinking back 6 and 3 years ago. But yeah, two different, quite different breastfeeding experiences to look back on there. But Sylvia, yours is more recent, isn't it?
Yeah, so my eldest is a 2 and 9 months boy. It's weird because between that 2.5 and 3, which I think like it's not quite there, so it's quite odd to say his age. And I have a 4-week-old baby, so a baby girl. So yeah, so I'm just kind of like in the midst of it. Just yeah, I have the memories very fresh in my head to compare both experiences. So it's quite interesting to do that.
Oh, congratulations.
Thanks.
So how have the first few weeks been for you, as it is so fresh in your head? How's it been?
Well, this few weeks have been very straightforward. As I was saying earlier, it's very different when you kind of know what you're doing, and I think there is like a level of knowledge that you're never gonna get just from like reading on the internet. I think like by seeing other people and by being like among other mums, you get so much more information that you were just reading up. I felt really informed for my first one, and then it was really tough. And I think for the second one, I have more of that hands-on experience that I think makes a lot of difference. So yeah, so it's been very, very different.
I definitely
So
think
did
that's...
you...
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Joe.
Just going to say, I definitely think that's true about seeing breastfeeding in real life. Even if you haven't breastfed before and it's your first baby, I think just being around other mums who are breastfeeding, so like going to a group, or maybe obviously groups aren't really running in the same way at the moment, but there are lots of kind of Zoom groups that you can join, or other video call groups. Because I think, like you say, Sylvia, I went to the antenatal, the NHS run antenatal class about breastfeeding before I had my first, and you know, thought, oh, that seems fine, you know, you're sort of taking the information, but your head's not really in it until you've had your baby, because you're so thinking about the birth and how's that going to go, especially if it's your first and you haven't given birth before. That's quite a daunting prospect, and you do a lot of preparation for birth. You go to a class about feeding and you sort of think, oh, I'm sure that'll be all right, you know, that looks fine.
Yeah.
That baby's latched on great in that video. It looks so easy. And but then it's only when you kind of see it in real life, or you have someone show you, that I think it kind of brings it to life for you and makes it a bit easier. So I definitely think until I had hands-on support with my own baby, I could have had all the knowledge in the world, but it wasn't enough until I saw, or I had help from other people with my own baby and trying to actually physically do it and have someone there supporting you. I think that's really helpful.
It's abstract, isn't it? Before it's really abstract, because I think as well you find that a lot of people kind of feel that it's, well, you've got a baby and you've got a boob, put them together, what more can there be to it? And I think you're absolutely right as well, to get over this huge mountain, which is birth first. It's hard to get your head into it, even though actually birth is the really small part to get over, because feeding can of course go on for a really, really long period of time in some situations. Definitely. So Sylvia, did you do much preparation before you had your first?
Yeah, so we had some antenatal classes as well. We had one specifically dedicated to breastfeeding. But I don't know, like because everyone in my family had breastfed, I kind of felt very like, oh, I kind of know what's going on. I lived with my cousin while she was breastfeeding her first daughter for the first couple of years. So I felt like, oh yeah, something natural that apparently my family, everyone can do. And I remember being really prepared for things like nipple pain and things like that. But then there were so many other issues that can go wrong with breastfeeding when you don't know that they're there. And I don't know, like just because like I only had one vision of breastfeeding, I couldn't understand or get my head around other things that can happen. So with my first, the main thing was that I had a very sleepy baby, which led to low milk supply, just because like I wasn't feeding him as often as I should have for the first few weeks. So I had to pump in between and do all this sort of thing, which it was a thing that I had never even heard of. Like I was prepared for pain, and I was prepared for things like mastitis, and I knew all about that, but I never even knew that you could just not produce enough milk. I mean, not that my body couldn't, just that I wasn't emptying the breast enough to produce more milk, and I didn't even know that that was a thing. So that was a bit of a shock. So yeah, I was prepared, but as I said, like I feel like with the I would call it like intellectual preparation, just the class preparation, they prepare you for like the standard breastfeeding experience, but everybody is different, and every baby is different, and everybody has different birth experiences. So like there's lots of other things that you could prepare for that might never happen to you, but I just feel like it's one of those things that I don't know if it could ever be prepared enough. So it's good to know where to look for help, and I think that was key for us. I think that was really important.
So it sounds like one of the little bits of information that maybe was missing for you was just understanding how breast milk production works. So the knowledge around to keep making breast milk, you have to keep removing your breast milk frequently, feeding your baby loads and loads and loads, because they need to feed so often because the milk is digested so quickly, but also that mechanism of how your body works. So that if you're not emptying your breast, not that they're ever actually empty, of course, but if you're not doing it often enough, then your supply can dip down. Sounds like you worked really, really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, but it paid off, because now with the second baby, I knew that that was what I was supposed to do. So even though people say, oh, you need to feed your baby, for example, like I remember that when I had my first, the midwives and the health visitors and everyone said like, oh, you need to feed your baby at least every 3 hours. But something in my head, I don't know if it was a lack of sleep or the tiredness or something like that, I just understood like every 3 hours. And now I see that, no, you have to feed your baby every time they're hungry, really, because that's when they need milk. So with my second baby, I just feed her whenever I see the hunger cues, and I'm quicker at understanding what those cues are for her as well. So yeah, so you live and you learn.
Yeah, I think that's a really key thing about the every 3 hours thing, because I think we know that newborn babies shouldn't go longer than 3 hours without having some breast milk. But I think people cling to that 3 hours and think they shouldn't have more than it shouldn't be more frequent than every 3 hours. And certainly that was some advice that I got from people around me, because I came from a family who hadn't really breastfed for long. So I think my mum breastfed me for about 2 weeks. Back in the early 80s, she had terrible advice. She was like really young as well. And so she just did what she was told. And what she was told was that baby should be going for longer between feeds. That baby should be, and you have to let your breast fill up. You have to give your breasts chance to fill up, which we know is like wrong. Like now I know from researching it myself that that's totally like, that will give you supply problems and mastitis, which is what happened to her. And then she was told to stop feeding because she had mastitis, and that was it. So yeah, I think those, like, that was really hard for her to get her head around when she was supporting me, because I was being told something completely different. You need to feed your baby to remove the milk, to make milk you need to remove milk, and you can't really feed your baby enough, can you? As soon as they make a noise, there's nothing wrong with feeding them, and if they don't want it, they won't take it. But I think I was so nervous to kind of oh, I'm picking up my baby again, I'm picking up my baby all the time. And like, and my mum was like, what, you've just fed her, like, shouldn't she go a bit longer and then she'll have a good long feed? And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, you know, you just don't know, do you, when you're new to it? But yeah, that took ages to kind of, but instinctively, I think as women, we know we want to feed, you know, when your baby cries or is upset, or even before they cry, you want to settle them straight away, don't you? But there's something in our society that kind of sticks to that old advice and says, don't pick up your baby too much, don't, you know, they might not want milk, you can try everything else first, but why not just try milk first? Because it usually works. So it's quite it's quite a funny one to get over. And like you, Silvia, with my second, I just, the minute she made a noise or a movement, I stuck her on the boob because I knew that it wouldn't hurt, and that actually, and she gained a lot more weight a lot more quickly than my first, because I was just feeding her all the time, really, and it went a lot more smoothly.
Do you think as well that there's something about feeling more confident to make your own decisions with the second?
Yeah,
definitely. I mean, for me, because I've had my baby in lockdown, it has meant that, well, luckily we haven't needed any support, because I know that the support is there if you do need it, but we've been pretty much left on our own. As with my first, it took us, like, now that we talk about weight gain, it took him 5 weeks to regain his birth weight, which is like a really, really, really long time, and we were really worried, and we had lots of support from, well, the peer support from you, Lucy, but from the health visitors and the midwives. But it just meant that we were bombarded with a lot of sometimes contradicting advice, and it was really confusing, especially because when you have your first, well, I personally believe that it is harder, not just because it's your first baby, you don't know what you're doing, but you've never been a mum before, so you've never had to make those decisions, you've never been confronted with those kind of problems. So I think that's really hard. But when you have a second baby, there are other things that are hard, but you already are a mum, so you know what to do, you know how to make decisions, and you know what how to say no as well. So this second time around, obviously we've been pretty much left on our own. We came back from hospital the same day that I had her. We have only seen one person pretty much since she's been born, and she regained her birth weight after 5 days. Actually, we don't even know how much she lost, because that was the only weight that she had, and she was back on her birth weight, so we don't even know if she lost any. And so it's been really relaxed, but at the same time, like, I feel more confident at just making my own decisions, and also judging Dr. Google much better. So if I have to Google something, like, I know which sources to trust and which not to trust. So that's much better. But I think, yeah, when you're a first-time mom, it's so hard, because you have your family history, you also have your friends, and you know, your mom friends and your friends who are not parents, who somehow also have an opinion sometimes, and you have the NHS website and all the support, but it's really hard to judge what is best for your baby and how to make those decisions confident.
And from what Joe said as well, there's always some people around you, and sometimes some people who you're really, really close to, who you would always ask for support and advice maybe, and take their opinions and their experiences. But it's really, really hard if they've had a very different information to you, because maybe it was, 20, 30 years ago. And sometimes that's really hard to navigate and to have those conversations around as well. So from what you were saying, it's quite tricky to get that balance, because you don't want to make somebody feel like you're saying that their experience was wrong, or that they were given rubbish advice, or made the wrong decisions or something like that. You're trying to protecting them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think anybody makes wrong decisions. Like, when they're in that situation, you make the decision based on what you're given, what information you're given, and how you're feeling, and how
Absolutely.
How you feel about that. And I think, that we know now that science, our understanding of the science of breast milk has moved on leaps and bounds, and people just didn't have that information back then, and they didn't have the internet, which I think in some ways is a blessing and a curse, because you can come across lots of contradictory information, which can be even less helpful. But also, you just didn't have anywhere. So if one nurse or one doctor was telling you something, that was your source of information, and that was it. So, you know, and who be, you know, from like my mum's perspective, like, who was she to like tell her doctor they were wrong? Like, she wouldn't have done that, because she was like, it was her first baby and she was really young, and she was like, and they were telling her, you've got to do 5 minutes on one breast, 5 minutes on the other, and then leave it for 3 hours. And like, why would you question that if you didn't know? So it is really tricky, and people, I think, can find that difficult to look back at their own experience in light of what now everybody knows.
So what would you say, for both of you, what would be your top tips for anyone who's watching this, who's about to have their first baby, or maybe they've just had their first baby and they're in that first week or so and wondering if what's going on is normal? What would your top tips be?
Who should go first?
No, I don't know.
I think if you're the like top tip from me would be, as soon as you possibly can, even better if you're still pregnant before you've had your baby, find out where you can go for proper breastfeeding support. So where's your local breastfeeding group? It's probably online now at the moment, but there would be something, or get the number of the National Breastfeeding Helpline, so that you've got somewhere that's clued up on breastfeeding and the latest information to go to if you encounter a problem. You might not even encounter a problem, but sometimes it's just about how you're feeling about things. Like, hang on, is my baby supposed to wake up this much? Am I supposed to be feeding this often? I thought I just fed my baby 5 minutes ago. Is that normal? You know, it might be that feeding itself is going fine, but you're wondering what's normal. And I think knowing where you can go for proper breastfeeding advice is the best thing you can do for yourself.
Sylvia, what do you think?
Well, I would say that as well. I think one of the things I regret with my first was not going to the group before. So when I went the first time, I was really nervous because I didn't know what it was about. And since then, all my friends who've been pregnant, I tell them, just go to your group, go with your belly and just meet the people, so that you know that if you encounter them on the internet or anything, you know who you're talking to. And it's much easier to ask a very personal question to someone who you've or sort of met. So yeah, I echo that. But I also think that it's not a tip, but it's just like a reflection on it. I think if it's your first baby, be aware that it's not just your baby who's been born the first time around, it's also you as a mum. So it is a very tricky time, and breastfeeding seems very normal, and like the publicity tells you that it's very natural and easygoing. But I always like that Anne says that breastfeeding is natural like walking, but it's not natural like breathing. Something that you're both learning, and and give yourself permission to to doubt yourself and to get information from other people, and and just know that it's both of you learning. So it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with your baby, something wrong with you. It is a learning curve. And and my other bit of advice is, when in doubt, just poop. Like, I think that's a very, very straightforward rule of thumb.
So for both of you, you've had different experiences, but I think what I'm hearing, the message I'm really getting is, it's hard, but it's worth it, and you get there. But get your support in place.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, well, it's been really interesting to hear both of your stories. Have you got anything else that you want to add in before we finish?
I don't know. I just think like this is for someone who might be struggling with breastfeeding, and they just want to maybe have a top up of formula here or a top up of formula there. I think formula is fine, and it's okay to use it when you feel like it's really needed. But I would just say, and this is particularly like something for the dads, it's not easier. Because I feel like a lot of people just think that, breastfeeding is really hard, therefore if we go for formula, like everything will be easier. But actually, like you are going that and sterilize things and do all that, and maybe you'll think that breastfeeding is actually more worth it just because there's less washing up to do. I don't know, at least it was a little bit like that for us. I'm just saying this because I've had a few friends who just think like that it's like the easy way, and then I just think like I have a 4-week-old baby, and so far we've been to walks in the woods, and I've been able to play with my toddler, and I've been able to do a lot of things just because I have milk ready wherever I go at the right temperature, and yeah, that I know that is really good for my baby. So I just think like it's just to put it out there that it's not necessarily the easy route, just because if you're like me and you hate washing up, then yeah, then breastfeeding is really worth pursuing.
Definitely would go along with that we are talking about the early days and how tough that can be, but there is definitely a point, I think, at which it switches and suddenly breastfeeding is the easier option, because it is, as you say, it's on tap, it's available all the time. And also it becomes, as they get older, if you feed into toddlerhood, then it becomes quite a good parenting tool as well. When they have a tantrum, it calms them down. You know, if they don't sleep well, it gets them off to sleep. It's not just about nutrition and feeding them, and it just becomes a very easy way of keeping your child quiet, occupied, happy, especially on things like those times where you need to keep, you know, where you want to keep your child quiet. Like, I don't know if anybody will be doing this anytime soon, but if you're on a plane or something, it even helps them, their ears not pop. You know, it's just like, it becomes a magic tool. But it just takes that bit of that. Sometimes it's quite tough to start, and it takes a bit of getting there. But once you get there, I'd say it's definitely worth it for loads of reasons.
So breastfeeding is your superpower by the sounds of it?
Pretty much. I don't really know how to parent my child when they come off it. I'm like, what am I going to do now? I have to actually think of other things to do to sort out all their problems. But no, yeah, it's really, it does make things easier, I think, if you go on longer with it. Lovely.
Thank you. Thank you both. That's been really, really great to hear from you. So we're going to try this again. So if anyone watching this has got some ideas about what you would like to hear mums talking about, please let us know. So you can go to our website, www.breastfeedingsouthgloss.co.uk, and use the contact us form on there. Tell us what you think. Tell us if there's some subjects you want us to talk about. And also you can find out where to get support from there as well. So thank you both very much, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.